Okay, welcome everyone. We will call to order our special meeting of council. And we'll start by recognizing that we are meeting today on the unceded traditional territories of the Sishot and Hoopa-Chesset First Nations. We do have an agenda in front of us. Are there any late items to add from staff? Seeing none, any late items from council? Seeing nothing to add, would somebody like to move approval of our agenda? Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Dame. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And we'll move on to delegations. We have one delegation today. We have MNP Chartered Accountants here to present our 2022 audited financial statements. So we'll call up our auditor and turn it over to you, Corey.
Thank you, Your Honor, and hello to the Mayor and Council. Thank you for inviting me here to speak today. We do have a short presentation, but I will start at the beginning while it's coming up. So I'll take you through some financial statement highlights of your 2022 financial statements, then talk a little bit about the audit process and wrap up by looking at some financial analysis. Just pause for a second, I'll get the presentation up. I can work from those while you start up if you want. You can get it. That's okay. Okay. So while the presentation is coming up, I will start here on the statement of financial position or the balance sheet as of December 31st, 2022. So summarizing the numbers that you see there in front of you, the city had cash and investments of $30.5 million at the end of the year. Total financial assets, so cash, investments, and accounts receivable, totaled $39.8 million. The debt being paid down on schedule by the city is just shy of $13 million at the end of the year. And if you add all the accounts payable, deferred revenue, and liabilities together, you get a number of $32.8 million. So when you subtract those liabilities from the financial assets, you see the subtotal line there of net financial assets of $6,948,000. And you can see that has decreased from the $12 million in the prior year, primarily because of an increase in payables right at year end. So that's timing of some of those payables coming through. The tangible capital assets, physical assets being managed by the city, all your infrastructure, road, water, sewers, buildings, and equipment have increased to $152.3 million. And the accumulated surplus at the city, which I will get into in a future slide, has increased to $160.2 million. The next page on the financial statements is what we call the statement of operations or the income statement. So here you can see the activities throughout 2022. So the city had total revenues of $46.1 million, an increase from 41.3 in the prior year, and an increase from budget. Those increases are coming primarily from recreation as the activity levels bounce back from the pandemic, as well as earnings from the Alberni Valley Community Forest. You can see it had $1.8 million of earnings through the year, and the tax increase per budget. On the expense side of things, $42.5 million of total expenses, an increase from 38.3 in the prior year. And it looks like an increase from budget, but I want to draw your attention to the city doesn't actually budget for amortization. So there's $5.6 million of amortization that's in your actual expenses. If you back that out, you get in total expenses of 36.9. So that is just a little bit higher than budget, not the $5 or $6 million that it looks like. So the increases, the main increases at the city for some of the other expenses, other than amortization, is general government increased expenses, recreation, and the sewer utility. So you can see it's coming in a few different areas. Thanks, Donna. So those statement of operation numbers have a lot of accounting adjustments in them. To unwind all of that, to get back to thinking of how you're thinking when you look at budget, we like to look at the cash flow statement. This is a little bit easier to understand than the income statement sometimes. So here you can see the total operations at the city brought in $11.9 million, basically the same amount as 2021. Capital spending of $14.3 million, so wastewater treatment plant being the big one, some water capital and equipment. The community forest contributed a $300,000 dividend back up to the city. $2.2 million of cash was moved out of the main bank accounts into the investments to make sure you're getting a good rate of return. Important to do as interest rates were climbing throughout the year. Debt being repaid on schedule of $364,000, and so a net cash outflow at the end of the year in the main general bank accounts of $4.7 million. I promised I would get into the what's in accumulated surplus. So the next slide shows us the total accumulated surplus of $160.2 million. So starting at the top, there's an operating fund deficit of $23 million that has improved from the prior year. The capital fund has $14 million in it. The equity in capital assets, that reflects the book value of all the tangible capital assets, all the physical assets that you can touch, minus the debt. So that's not a cash balance. That's just an accounting entry for the net book value of those assets. And then there's $29.7 million set aside in reserves for future projects. And that totals the $160.2 million. Switching gears a little bit, we'll talk about the audit and the audit process. We're happy to be providing what we call an unmodified opinion. We are satisfied that the financial statements that you have in front of you are prepared in all material respects in accordance with the appropriate accounting standards for local government. Ready to sign the report after council approval here today and the completion of a few wrap-up items. When we're performing our audits, we look at the controls at the city to ensure that you're getting accurate financial reporting. We sample transactions. We don't look at every transaction throughout the year. And to do our audit and drive our testing, we calculate a number that we call materiality. So that number for the city is $1.7 million. It's calculated as roughly 4% of your annual revenues. We look at every transaction that's larger than that amount. So large capital grants, large capital spending, and then underneath that balance, we sample. We didn't find any unusual items or anything that I need to bring to council's attention. A big thank you to city staff in the finance department and throughout the city. We don't just bug finance, but they take most of the heavy lifting. So big thank you to their help with the audit this year. I will confirm that MMP is independent of the city. The MMP audit team didn't do any other projects that would impair my ability to give you an independent audit opinion. MMP itself did do one other project with the city, however, that was done by a separate team. And I'll wrap up by talking about getting back into the numbers. So I started looking just at 2022 and the 1 year. So I like to end off looking at the last 4 or 5 years and what trends we can see in your financial statements. We start by looking at this ratio that we call the sustainability ratio. So here we're looking at your financial assets, your cash and your receivables, or your more liquid assets, and comparing it to your liabilities. If this ratio is above 1, it means you have some reserves and financial resources set aside to pay for future projects. If it dips below 1, you're in what we call a net debt position, and you are taxing or raising user fees in the future to pay for the past. So this ratio is currently 1.21, so that's good. It's above that magic number of 1, but it has been declining from 2.1 in 2017. So as you saw, the net debt number coming, the net financial asset number coming down on that first balance sheet that we looked at. That's another indicator here of decrease in this ratio. And the last one we look at is what we call the flexibility ratio. So this one looks at the tangible capital assets and the rough aging of the assets that you're managing. So it does not bring into account condition assessment or when some replacement might need to happen. But by looking at the rough aging, we get a sense of what costs might be coming up for the city. So for this ratio, in 2022, it was 55.6%. This ratio has been trending upward since 2018. So these ratios do go hand in hand. As the capital asset ratio is climbing, that means there's been significant spending. You can see the $13–14 million each year of capital spending. That's increasing that capital asset ratio. getting on top of some of those maintenance and those assets that are needed for infrastructure. As a result, though, the debt in some years, the debt went down this year, but in some years it has been climbing, and that net financial asset, net debt ratio has been declining. So they do go, as you get more capital, more infrastructure, less on that sustainability ratio. So I will end there, and I would be happy to answer any questions that council has.
Thank you very much. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Corey, when we talk about the financial assets to liabilities is currently 1.21, but it's been declining since 2017. Is there kind of a sweet spot that we should be working towards, or is there an average of municipalities for that number?
Sure. Thank you, Councillor. It's a great question. There's no, I talk about 1 being the magic number because you slip into that net debt position. But in terms of where you should be, most of the communities that I work with on the island are somewhere between 1.5 and 2.5. You have some reserves set aside, some investments to be able to manage big capital projects coming, to not have to be totally reliant on other levels of government for funding and things. I don't see any communities going much past that 2.5, because then you're really putting aside a lot of money, and that number is pretty big if you're at 2.5. I have a few communities that have dipped below 1. Usually that's a large capital year. There's a $30 million water treatment plant with debt associated can swing you down. But it's more about that trend there and being aware of where those things are going. What you can see from those two trends together is significant investment in infrastructure and capital, right? As opposed to just services. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. I was just wondering, is there any particular anomalies or standing out as a result of COVID and coming out of COVID that are reflected in this budget?
Thank you, Councillor. That's a great question. Haven't had that one. That's a good one. One of the biggest things we see is that rebound in recreation, both in the revenues coming in, that's higher activity, more of the community using it, and the expenses are there as well to go along with it, right? You're paying staff to provide those services. That's the biggest impact you see in these statements is that bit of that bounce back. The COVID restart money that had been provided has been used to provide services and do things. So there is a note in there that in the financial statements that goes into how much is left. The province is asking communities to use it up, do the projects and things. So you can see that one has been wound down a bit. That's probably the biggest two things that I see coming out of the pandemic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from council? Seeing none, Councillor Solda, would you like to read the motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that the auditor's report and the 2022 audited financial statements prepared by the MNP Chartered Accountants be received and approved as presented.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Patola. Not seeing any additional questions on the motion. All in favor? Carried. Thank you so much, Corey. Thanks to your team for their work this year, and of course to our finance team as well. We'll move on to reports from in camera, and we will go to our CAO to present our council 2023 to 2027 corporate strategic plan and an overview.
Thank you, and through the chair, I just would like to congratulate council on a really forward-looking document, and I'm looking forward to getting started on the strategic plan. So I'm looking forward to public's comment on it and perusal, and everybody's input into it after the fact. And I'm sure you'll hear lots from the community on it.
Great, thank you. So this is a plan that council has been working on for a reasonable amount of time, a lot of changes, a lot of back and forth, and looking forward to having it in the public now. This, as it typically is, we'll have updates to it as we work through projects, and we look forward to hearing public feedback as well. Council, are there any questions or comments or items that any of you would like to add? Yeah. Councillor Solda.
Just a quick question, Madam Mayor. If somebody wants a copy of it, how do they obtain it, and when will it be available for the public?
Great question. I'll go to our CAO.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair, it will be available on our website ASAP, and also we'll be sharing it through social media. But if somebody would like a hard copy, we can contact the front desk at City Hall, and we can make copies available.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no other questions, this is just for information, so we'll move on to new business. And we have one item today, and that is appointment of our corporate officer. Councillor Patola, would you like to read that motion?
Madam Mayor, I would like to move that council appoint Donna Monteith as corporate officer and assign the responsibility of corporate administration for the city of Port Alberni to Ms. Monteith in accordance with Section 148 of the Community Charter, effective May 15, 2023.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Solda. Any comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And that takes us to question period. This is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions of City Council. Would any members of the public like to ask questions today? Mr. Anderson.
Hi. I'm so mixed up with, I wasn't at the meeting a week ago, I was at a convention in Abbotsford, so I'm sorry I wasn't. I listened to it yesterday. I'm curious today when I came in, I was locked out of the washrooms. And so if you could give me a very brief idea of what security issues are we trying to obtain around City Hall? And I guess we're in the 3-question issue now.
We're actually not. We have not updated.
Oh, okay.
I guess we
Thank
are.
you.
Did we formally pass that? No, I think not all of it. Anyways,
Okay.
we'll give you more than 3
Anyway,
questions
I'm-
today,
I'm-
potentially. I'll just go to our CAO to answer that question.
Yeah, why, and also not only what are we doing at what cost, and why are we doing it? I got mixed messages that sometimes it was a result of speakers at the mic here, and maybe things that are happening outside the system coming in. If you could clarify that for me, I'd appreciate it.
Through the chair, the washrooms at City Hall are a location that are unmonitored, and with needing to get a key from the front desk, public can still access the washrooms, except for if somebody is in the washroom for a prolonged period of time, administration can go and check and make sure everything's okay in the washroom. So it's more about a check and balance, making sure that nobody has an accident or a safety concern in the washroom, and nobody's there to look after what is happening. So that is the main reason why we are locking the washrooms at City Hall.
Which should be unmonitored anyway. I understand what you're saying. Could you give me an idea of some of the other safety issues that you're dealing with and what the cost is?
Through the chair, safety issues at City Hall are more about unrestricted access into certain areas. So there are some recommendations that came forward. Council currently is putting $30,000, I believe, in the current budget, but there will be other asks as we move forward, not just solely based on safety, but also office space and also possible other redesign that are necessary for City Hall. But from a safety perspective, as the City Hall continues to, our city continues to grow, there may be other concerns, but most of it is about flow of traffic in City Hall that we need to address. So those are the major things. The 30,000 in the budget is to create 2 doors where currently swing gates are located, and then also an additional door in council chambers for the safety.
So the total cost is approximately 30,000.
Currently in the budget.
Yes. It was mentioned, I believe, at the last Monday meeting that there was concerns about, not sure if the word was threat, but it's important. What kind of, not who, but what kind of threats is City Council feeling from the general public that raises this concern? It's a legitimate concern, but I would like to know, is it coming from people at the podium, such as myself? Not you. Well, I'm not clear. It can be suggested, it can be many people. I haven't heard too many incidents where it couldn't be controlled, but nevertheless, where is these set threats coming from? Is it coming from outside in the public? I think it's interesting, people should understand that
Sure.
sometimes you have to go through some things that are not comfortable to deal with.
Yeah, so we're not talking about people coming to the podium and asking questions. That's certainly not what we're talking about when we say threats. But I'll go to our CAO for that.
Thank you for the question. And through the chair, in many communities, there actually have been threats to a council member or to many council members or staff in meetings. And sometimes barriers are put in most city halls now. It is recommended if they're undergoing renovations to create a barrier to keep the separation. So if there is some person that's in distress or decides to take upon themselves an alternative action, that they can't have direct access to the elected officials or staff. So people have time to react to the situation. And it's growing in Canada. It's not as imminent in Port Alberni. And I'm glad that there hasn't been any incidences. But before there is, it's more of a forethought that it has happened across Canada. And we want to make sure that we're ahead of that curve. So if something was to happen, that nobody is in danger and everybody can feel safe being in the council chambers.
So it's prevention rather than the threats of being realistic and out there. I'm sure you get some nasty phone calls and stuff.
Yeah, through the chair, I haven't been at this council table very long, but my understanding is that there hasn't been any physical threats that have resulted in any damage. I don't know about each individual councillor and their feelings of any intimidation from the gallery, but everybody should be able to feel safe in conducting business, and that's where there may be changes.
Okay, thank you. One other. Three. One other, this is clarification. If I want to bring a question to City Council, or a person, I shouldn't say myself. If it's to deal with City Council business particularly, then I can bring it to City Council. If it's something that should be directed to a staff member, then am I correct in what I'm understanding? I hope I'm not. That I have to go through that staff member first, who will listen to your concerns, and if they're legitimate and can be dealt with, may refer them to City Council to be addressed by City Council. Where am I getting this mixed up here, or am I getting it mixed
The
up?
changes that were made specifically to question period were not related to whether it is council business or operational. The changes that were made to question period were about asking questions from the business of that meeting specifically. That is for council meetings. We did open up more broadly committee of the whole meetings to be able to ask more broad questions. If it was an operational question, we would more likely, of course, refer you to staff, but you're still welcome to ask them at a committee of the whole meeting. The intent of the change to the procedures bylaw question period for council meetings is that often questions are asked where we don't have the information in front of us, we don't have the report, and we're not able to answer those questions. So we're trying to keep it relevant to the meeting that had just happened when people get up and ask questions in question period for a council meeting.
For council
And give
meetings.
more flexibility at committee of the whole meetings.
Okay, that's fine right now. A lot of questions and a lot of changes. And I'm supposed to ask questions. It seems like there was an overwhelming accept at two councils for public input. And I haven't heard of any in doing the code of conduct. And I hear a lot of talk about the importance of public input. It often happens after the decision-making process, and it should come beforehand. Why there was a lot of discussion. I brought it up several times because this whole code of conduct was extremely important to me. I thought it was a huge opportunity that we've probably fallen short of. But why was there a reluctance to talk to the public? I don't mean I meet you in the street and you get questions here. I'm sorry. I do have a level of trust over the last few years, and I'm not going to get into that. And I need to know that you've actually made efforts to talk to the public and that they have a chance to talk to themselves and hear everyone's different opinions. I'm wondering why there was a reluctance to do this and that important document, the Code of Conduct.
Thank you. So as you are aware, because you were at the meeting, we did host a committee of the whole meeting. We did hear from the public for, I think it approached almost 3 hours. 2.5, maybe, something like that. So that was the opportunity that we welcomed members of the public formally into that process. As you note, of course, we also talked to people in the public at the grocery store, see on social media, and various other methods of more informal public input. But the formal opportunity for input into the Code of Conduct was that committee of the whole meeting, where we made great effort to make sure nobody felt discouraged from getting up multiple times if they wanted to, and giving all the input that they felt they needed to.
Okay,
Thank you.
and that was after the draft was made.
And before it was adopted. Thank you.
But after the draft was presented by the Committee of the Whole.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Are there other members
Am
of
I
the
right
public
in
who would like to speak to? I already said yes, so yes, you
No,
are
you
right in
did,
saying
yes.
that. Thank you. Come on forward.
Hi, Lisa from Port Alberni, because I'm not going to give my address. I'm kind of with him. I'm not understanding why there's starting to be a lot of parameters around the public speaking with elected officials, but they also do work for us. And I'm finding that it seems to be more and more barriers that are coming up, and the website is not easy to access for people. They have to be, let's say, older people, more like me too. I go around trying to navigate that. I don't understand that. Half the bylaws people aren't understanding. People that have read bylaws for a long time cannot understand what they mean and what's going on with them. I don't feel like that is actually letting the public know what is actually going on, because they can't decipher all the word salad that goes on in everything that's going on. I don't understand why all of a sudden things need to be locked. I don't understand why all of a sudden you need these barriers and you're already freaked out about somebody coming to council and coming at you. The only thing that I could come up with is that there's going to be some stuff coming down that people aren't going to be happy with. And I think it's already starting. It started already in Cherry Creek. And I think it's going to come here with the OCP coming up with the bylaw changes that if the OCP comes up and there's certain things put in there that you can change that bylaw whenever you want. You can change zones whenever you want. I feel like some of the public are starting to understand that this is not transparent and trustworthy. And the more barriers that you put up, the more people are getting that feeling. So could you please tell me if that is not the case, because that's what I see.
Thank you, Lisa. So that's definitely not the case. One thing you might not have heard is that we did actually increase the amount of time people can come and speak for at council. We increased the number of people who can come and speak. We've had discussion about increasing the number of committee of the whole meetings so that there's more informal opportunities for members of the public to come and speak. We are trying to formalize our council meeting process so that they are more about completing the business of council, still completely open, still having a question period for people to get up and ask questions. But the intent is that most of the bigger items come to a committee of the whole meeting prior. So it's not coming to a council meeting where it's in front of us, we're going to adopt it, and nobody has any opportunity to speak. The intent is it's coming to a less formal committee of the whole meeting where members of the public can get up, have input, ask their questions. Then it's going to come to a formal council meeting weeks later, usually, where people have had the opportunity to talk about it on social media, to ask questions, to write letters if they want to, and then we'll have more discussion about it at council. So our intent is actually to slow the process down in some for some specific bigger items, so that there is more opportunity for public input. And then following that, we're making more informed decisions. So we have made changes to, or we're in the process of making changes to our procedures bylaw, but this is absolutely not in an effort to restrict people from coming out, giving their input. In fact, we're trying to open up more effective ways for that to happen, and specifically more opportunities. We also passed an amendment to that procedures bylaw that allows members of the public who are not able to attend in person to attend electronically and ask their questions on their own. You've always been able to, of course, email in. We've had that technology, but we'll make it so that now you're able to ask questions with your own voice as well during the meeting. So we are really looking for ways to allow more input into our process, and specifically earlier in the process rather than at the decision-making point. Thank you.
Thank you. That would be great, because what I see when you're trying to look stuff up and you're even trying to look at the calendar of when these meetings are, hasn't been great. So I look for them. People that don't look for them, they're not gonna know. And I'm gonna be honest, I think people just give up coming because they don't feel like they have any input that's gonna make a difference. And I don't think that that's good for our city at all. Like, maybe you can explain to me, what is this corporate strategic plan? I'm sorry, I don't understand what that is.
So our corporate strategic plan is a document that typically each council will create. So we are a reasonably new council, so we, rather than just working from the last 4-year strategic plan, this council has created one. It is publicly available in this agenda online, and it will be placed on the website as well. So you are able to go on there and get it. We always do have printed versions of our strategic plan in City Hall as well, so we'll make sure we have those, as that's what we've always done for people to just wander in and pick one up. This is basically the bigger picture document that guides the work of council over our term. So it lets the public know what our priorities are, what we are intending to move forward on. Additional, we're planning to add, as a result of recommendation from our new CAO, a public kind of tracking document on how we are doing with these initiatives, and more detail, because you'll see that they're quite high level, more detail about what the initiatives actually look like in terms of projects, where we're at, and what the next steps are. So that will be publicly available all the time and updated frequently as well.
Yes, that would be appreciative, because half the time you go on there, like, you guys know what you're talking about, but public, they kind of need to have a little bit more of a better reading or understanding of that. And the last question I have for now, which I might have more later, but the OCP plan, I know that I keep looking on the website and it was supposed to be these dates, but it's kind of changed. And now I'm looking at here and it says last item or late item that's going in. And how's that? Where are we with the OCP plan? Because I feel like it's really important for people to know if bylaws are going to change or zones going to change.
Yeah, it is for sure. And the OCP is a long-term project that we've been working on for, I think, over a year, I don't know. And we're not near done yet. But our next meeting coming up at 6 p.m. tonight, there is an update on the OCP and where we're at. So there will be more discussion about that at the next meeting. And that is a committee of the whole. So if you have questions or comments, you'll have an opportunity to get up and speak to them.
Yes, because when you look at the website, it was like that was supposed to be done, that was supposed to be done, or whatever. So you're following along and you're trying to keep up with it, but it's not even accurate. So if I'm looking at it, other people are not going to know about it. That's where it feels like it's not transparent. I think that's where I'm getting the disconnect, maybe. Okay, I'll ask more questions if I need to later. Thank you.
Thank you. Would any other members of the public like to ask questions? Thanks. And if you don't mind just introducing yourself.
Hello, I'm Charlene. I live in the Cherry Creek area. I just want to ask a question about your water. And do you know what fluoride is?
CAO.
Through the chair, yeah, I do know what fluoride is.
So it's an aluminum byproduct. That's correct, right? And so why is it in the city water?
Through the chair, I believe that there's different forms of fluoride. There are some that are naturally occurring and others that are a byproduct of an industry use. I would have to talk with our city engineer to see if we do add fluoride into our water and what type it is and where it's from, to give you any more details on the type of fluoride.
Okay, well, that's great, thank you. You've all received a package regarding the UNDRIP agenda that the UN is trying to implement here. And I was wondering, are you still planning, I know that you wanted to adopt that because Vancouver did. I was just wondering, is City Council thinking of adopting the UNDRIP agenda in the near future?
Thank you. So council has taken a variety of steps already. And I'm trying to remember back to the meeting where we did receive the report where we spoke specifically about UNDRIP. And it was a meeting quite a while ago, so we would have to probably refresh ourselves before we spoke to what possible next steps might be. But I would reference that our current priorities are driven not specifically from UNDRIP, but from our reconciliation report that was jointly created and adopted by the city, Sashot, Hupachesit, and the Friendship Center. That was a process that we went through over the course of a couple of years where we created local priorities, and that's where most of our actions are coming from today. But there will be ongoing initiatives always, and I would say most likely there is intent to move forward with the municipal recommendations out of UNDRIP.
That is very sad. Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak today? Okay, would somebody like to move adjournment? Moved by Councillor Patola, seconded by Councillor Solda. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, thank you.